I was about 3 years old when I was initially diagnosed with learning disabilities. I'm an extrovert, so naturally I'm very chatty, so I would say things maybe that weren't exactly right time. In social situations, I would get more emotional. If there was conflict, I was very uncomfortable to the point of tears. So over a 3-year process, my parents found out that I was diagnosed with ADHD and Asperger's. And then as I kind of grew older and, grew as a person and, tried different learning styles and experiences, we found that maybe Asperger's was not the right diagnosis. So when I was 18 years old, I was reevaluated and it came to that I still had ADHD, but instead of Asperger's, I have a nonverbal learning disability. My name is Abby. I'm 21 years old. I live in Oshawa, Ontario, Canada, and I have ADHD and NVLD, which stands for a nonverbal learning disability. Nonverbal communication is difficult, timing things, and even sometimes recognizing space is difficult. I used to have a tough time reading body language, and I still do sometimes, but not as bad. Just an overall awkwardness when it came to being in group situations. Spatial stuff is not as easy for me. I've taken my time getting my license. I still don't have the full one yet. Another thing that NVLD definitely affects with communication is texting. I find it very frustrating because I can't tell how a person is feeling. I can't tell their emotions because it's just text. A lot of the time I'll misinterpret it and think that someone's mad when they're actually not mad, they're just texting. In school, I struggled with math. It was hard for me to really understand how numbers worked and especially a lot of the rules. I also struggled with science. I was pretty aware of the ADHD when I was 6 in class. The fact that I would try to focus in on what my teacher was saying, but then my brain would go somewhere else. And I would just go on, and I would miss almost the entire lesson.
When Abby was struggling in school, both elementary school and high school, it was pretty excruciating on a couple of different levels. Seeing her suffer with frustration. She was taking piano and voice lessons, and she would talk through practicing instead of actually practicing, and I just knew that she was developing a complex, I guess, for lack of a better word, and feeling limited, feeling like she couldn't do things if she couldn't do things perfectly.
So it literally felt like nailing gel to a wall. It was almost impossible.
So I have a couple nephews that have been diagnosed with Asperger's, and when Abby was diagnosed with it, I noticed a distinct difference between them. And so I didn't really believe the diagnosis at first.
I was 18 when I got reevaluated. I went into the psychologist's office and he said, "You don't have Asperger's," which I was kind of expecting. And then he said, "But you do have a nonverbal learning disability." My first reaction was, what the heck is that?
It was difficult to see her struggle through the re-diagnosis. One thing I remember her saying is that I've carried this label with me almost my entire life. I don't know if she had certain expectations of herself because of the Asperger's diagnosis or what, but the adjustment was painful for her.
I thought I had Asperger's for 13 years. The whole idea of having your identity wrapped into having learning disabilities is sometimes it almost stops you from doing things. I can't do this thing because I have ADHD, or I can't be in this social situation because I'm not gonna read it right. It's normal, but that shouldn't let you wrap your identity in your fears.
It freed her up. She allowed herself to be encouraged to find level ground.
This is Sam Vaughn for Sam's Sports Report. We'll be getting more into my podcast about sports later today. Part 2 of our podcast, sports. Part 1 will be disabilities. And so here we go. A lot of people are saying, here's the disability part where you talk about gross motor skills, autism, what it's like being diagnosed with a learning disability, reading body language and processing disorder, ADHD, gross motor skills, NLVd, which is nonverbal learning disabilities. In this video you just saw, a lot of people will say wrong things, and it's called impulsiveness. I am very impulsive, and sometimes, for example, I either try to be funny or just not the right timing, or all think it's a joke and it's not funny to them, so it's not a joke. This happens more with girls and guys because maybe guys find it funny, but maybe girls don't. In school, kids with NLVd usually have no problem memorizing facts, but they have trouble with the ideas and organizing information. This card, it works. Kids with NLVd may have physically and clumsy and awkward because they have a hard time understanding what they see and how they are taking up space. To me, this means like taking up space like a suitcase. Like maybe I'll leave it in the middle of the room and people won't be able to walk through it, including maybe me sometimes. Some people have greater motor skills, which makes it a harder time for them to write physically and all those things we just named above, and maybe hard time swimming, whatever. We'll read it into the definition at the end. You may have some time reading people that are mad, upset, or whatever, or sad, or you can't add them on Facebook. I don't know. Leaving a suitcase in the middle of a room is a shown of spatial issues. Accidents prevents people going through. She is trying to get a license, which is very hard. I actually got my license, but decided because of anxiety, and now my mental health disorders and some of my pills, it would not work with it. Texting is a communication issue that maybe some people with processing disorder hurts. Texting fights are the worst because then one person gets mad and then the other person gets mad and then they get off cuff and then everybody goes crazy and then everybody wants to respond. If you just pick up the phone and dial their number, it may be better. Another reasoning texting is hard for me, for some, because they can't read their mind and they can't read what's going on in the text. She would miss lessons in her school or in her classes because of ADHD, which is a focus disorder. Individual lessons, your brain may go somewhere else when you have ADHD. For example, when I work out with my trainer, my brain goes somewhere else sometimes. When Abby is struggling with school and pretty exhausting, it's hard to watch a parent go through that, and the parents have to cope with it, and that can be really hard, especially when they're first diagnosed. When supposing, for an example, a learning disability, if you have one, makes it hard, much like I do. A few or more makes it called a complex learning disability, or one that makes it just really hard for you, so you have a more hard time with it. So you have a complex learning disability. Because I went to special programs, I know that many people that struggle with this. Later she told, like so many people in the days before, and still, later she talked about being diagnosed with autism, but it wasn't the right disorder. In my words, is Asperger's. Will be telling you that you have a disability, but it's not the same because you may have a spectrum, but I refer to it as Asperger's because it means that you can function without being diagnosed with it. Using labels on somebody is hard. It is hard on the person. Just take me for example. If I read into the labels too much, it makes my life harder. To become more independent, it helps to not label yourself and destroy your life. Once you begin to do that, you will free up your life. This is a little bit off base, but in 2019, I went to the hospital and my doctor, Dr. Fordenreich, who is a very researched doctor at Mass General Hospital, the mental health disorders, he told me to accept it and your life would be a lot better. This is Sam Vaughn with Sam's Learning Disability Day.